Dutton, Peter Dutton, basically he's not sure if he's coming or going on absolutely removing the Paris Agreement. He says he'll announce it after the next election if they get elected, what their net zero target will be. But he hasn't. He doesn't stand for anything.
Grow a pair, mate. Grow a pair.
He's not going anywhere. Seriously, if we wanted an opposition that's exactly the same as Labor, I mean, Malcolm Roberts said it very well, and it's just too rude to say. I'll just do the clean version. They're two wings of the same bird. Labor, Liberal, same thing. We went from, didn't he say only about a week ago he was going to go to 2050? Didn't he say that? Yeah. And then we backtracked to 2030, back to the Paris Accord.
Yeah, Craig, how does this work?
Just let me go through the history of this, okay? I was sitting in the coalition party room. Yeah. Tony Abbott comes in one day and says, we're signing up to Paris, a 26 to 28% reduction. And I'm sitting next to the guy. Did I miss the discussion and this? Did I miss the debate? Did I go for a bathroom break and I missed the discussion and the debate? Right? It was just decided unilaterally that we would sign up to Paris at 28% reduction. A couple of years later, I said to Tony, I said, mate, why did you do that? And he said to me, he said, I was being pressured by Turnbull and Julie Bishop and Brandis and Pine, and, they were all onto it. They all wanted me to do it, and I was trying to run a consultative cabinet where we all agreed on stuff sort of thing, and I think if you asked Tony today, he would say he regrets that decision, And my argument was, as soon as you set a target on the coalition side, you'll be gazumped by Labor and the Greens. It doesn't matter what number that you come up with, right? Labor and the Greens will say, we want to up the number. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. So coalition went with the 28%, right, which is crazy as it was to do it. Labor came and said, no, we'll lift it. This is by 2030, by the way. So it was a reduction of 2005 levels of your CO2 emissions, which is, if we had some sparkling mineral water, we'd see the bubbles go up. That's what we're talking about, right? So it was off 2005 levels, a 28% reduction by 2030. Labor kicked that up and plucked the number out of the air of 43% reduction. Now, when it comes to how that will affect the CO2 in the atmosphere in the parts per million, you won't even be able to measure it, let alone whatever effect. So whatever target you have by 2030 is really completely irrelevant, but they've both got a 2050 target. And again, that came about one day. I was sitting in the party room and we went to, I think it was the 2019 election, saying we're not going to have a 2050 target. We're not going to agree to this net zero nonsense. Yeah. Right? All of a sudden, again, we're sitting in the party room and Scott Morrison comes in. Oh, yeah, he comes back from and says, oh, yes, we've now agreed to a net zero at 2050. Again, I'm going, where was the discussion? Where was the debate?
Yeah.
And so you've got both parties heading for this, sold on this net zero nonsense by 2050, which is completely destructive to our economy. Now, I would like some of them to sit down. Remember, this is not just about electricity. This is about all forms of your CO2 and your methane emissions. So this is about your farting and burping animals, right? This is about your road transport. This is about your what you're seeing emissions releases from when you mine coal and when you drill for gas. I'd like to see someone explain to me how many cattle do we need to cull to reach these targets?
I have a question. From an education perspective, are all our politicians forgetting fifth grade science and photosynthesis? I'm sorry, but seriously, have they not heard that planting trees, having forests, not deforestation to put these atrocious windmills, doesn't that cut your emissions anyway, your CO2 levels? Like, hello, CO2 gives you oxygen if you've got trees and vegetation and all the rest of it, no?
So I did a lot of work on this in 2012, I think it was, looking into whatever the relevant AR report, the assessment report from the IPCC was at the time. And the starting point for this project that I did was that they were correct about all their numbers. We assumed that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, whom I genuinely think is wrong about most things, we assumed they were right about everything. And we did the maths based on Julia Gillard's Not a Carbon Tax, if you can recall those days. It's not a carbon tax. And we said if everything goes perfectly and she gets exactly the amount of emissions reductions that she says she's going to get, how much of a difference will it make to the temperature of the Earth in 100 years' time? And I don't recall the number precisely, but it was something along the lines of 0.0000005 of 1 degree, which, to put that in perspective, is less than the margin of error of the best, most sensitive thermometers that we have. So, Australia is 1.4% of global man-made emissions, which is also then dwarfed by natural emissions as well. and CO2 makes up 400 parts per, or 420 odd parts per million. So we are 1.4% of 0.04% of the atmosphere. And we think that we're going to set a target and which is going to be like a thermometer on the Earth? Come on.
Funnily enough, I played Alan Jones, this clip that Alan Jones goes through exactly what you just said. And guess what? Instagram labelled me as the spreader of misinformation.
Yeah. These fact checkers from Soros,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, please.
My real concern with this net zero nonsense is that it surrenders our nation's national competitive advantage. Right? What makes us a wealthy country compared to the rest of the world is that beautiful black coal seam that runs down our eastern seaboard. It's the gas that we have. It's our agriculture. They're the things that give us the strength, that give us the wealth to do all the things that we want to do, to help kids with disabilities through the NDIS and help people on the pensions and aged care and things like that so they have able to retire in dignity. Now, you cannot finance all those things if you are surrendering those things that we are good at. And instead, you go through every single thing with net zero, every single policy. It results in a wealth transfer from Australia to China. It hands a competitive advantage to China over Australia. And because remember, what's China doing with net zero? They said, oh, we might get there by 2060. You guys go first, and then we'll trust us. Once we've taken over all your industry and all the industries moved to China,
Yeah.
right? We'll then get there by 2060. But you guys destroy your economy first. It's okay.
Well, if